Welcome back, B-Shifters. John Vance here, your host. Glad to have you along today for our conversation with Rich Merritt. We're going to talk with Rich about digital combustion. And if you don't know what that is, or Fire Studio, you'll find out today. It is the platform that Blue Card runs its simulations on, but it's also a very powerful simulation package that allows you to build your own simulations. So we'll talk to Rich a little bit about all of that. Rich is an interesting guy. Him and his partner, Doug, started this company 23 years ago out of their houses in Southern California, where they're both firefighters. Firefighters first, technical guys second. So they have great firefighting experience that they can actually put into the simulations. So thanks for being here today with our conversation with Rich Merritt. Let's hit it. All right, we're with Rich Merritt from Digital Combustion. And to start off with, Rich, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started Digital Combustion.
Well, it's an interesting story because when we first started, Doug Prochnow, he was my paramedic partner we worked in Southern California, and we had got into doing a lot of the video production for the fire department just by chance. It was we were the tech guys at the time, and so we had been doing a lot of that. And one day we walked into the library at the station, and there was like some stick figure drawings of a house with some smoke coming out of it, and it said A, B, C, D on it, and some writings, north, south, and some other things on it. And I was asking, I go, what's that? And they said, well, they had the captain's test in there, and that was the simulator. I said, what? I go, that was a simulator? And so I got to thinking, and at the time, this was in the 90s, and I was self-taught. I was fascinated with 3D animation. And that was when it was just really starting in its early stages. And so I was self-taught in 3D animation. And I thought, hey, there's a way to make smoke and fire in the 3D world. And so, between Doug and I, we started experimenting with a better way of doing it. Some way to come up with some sort of system where we could do a simulator using 3D animation. That was the original focus on it. And so we started experimenting, and that's really how Digital Combustion was born. We started getting some programming done, and we started, figuring out a way to move smoke and fire around on a screen. And, we had some people that we hired to try and figure things out. And, so in the end, we finally came up with a product, but at that time, we're talking, late 90s, the computers were nowhere near what they are today. So you couldn't do any of this stuff in real time. And so our first product was actually on a laser disc. And, I'm not sure how many of your listeners even know what a laser disc is, but it was like a big giant DVD before there was DVDs. And it was the only thing where we could put different scenes on it and then have random access to it. So we'd have the front view of the building, the rear view of the building in various stages of fire. And you actually had a barcode reader in the manual. So if you wanted to go to the rear of that building to see what was happening, you would scan the barcode, and it would jump to that scene. So everything was pre-rendered. And so we had, a couple of commercial buildings and a couple of residential buildings, and that was our product. It was a laser disc. And the first show we went to, you don't have any idea how the public, firemen are going to look at this. It's something completely new that no one's ever seen before. And we talked to, 1 minute we're thinking, oh, this is going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then, 2 minutes later, no one's going to buy this. There's no one's going to buy this. So we played those games with ourselves. But, so we did the first show. It was a fire instructors conference in San Jose. And so we brought Doug's big giant 32-inch TV from home, because he had the biggest TV of anybody. And, so we lugged that thing down there with a table, and we had our cardboard sign, and, started showing our laser disc when the show opened. And probably within 15 minutes, we had 10, 15 people deep at our booth lined up looking at it, because no one had ever seen anything like that. And so, that was it. We thought we had made it.
That's cool.
Then we realized it, even though all these people said they were going to buy it, we thought they said they were going to buy it. Well, with fire department budgets and all that, some of that might take 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, or even next year. So, we finally got, a few orders trickling in, and then, it went from there. And so that's how it really started. And then until the computers caught up, we didn't have a computer program, and until a few years later when Fire Studio 1 finally came out.
The Blue Card program is based on recognition prime decision making. Did you guys even have that discussion, or were you just trying to make sims? Did you know that it laid in very well with RPM?
Well, at the time, no. I mean, we knew that, people were doing simulators, whether it was sometimes they just put a picture up, and then at the time there was that sand.
We had one of those, the overhead projector.
Yeah, the overhead projector with the sand, and you could brush it away, and if you happen to bump the screen, the fire was in the sky. But people were doing that, and so we knew what the concept was, and we knew why we wanted to do it. But I think, even Blue Card, wasn't even a thought at that point. And but at that time, Phoenix Fire Department with the Brunacinis, they were really early adopters of Fire Studio. They loved the concept, and they loved what they were able to do with it even back then. And so the fact that they were early adopters, of course, helped us, because people looked to Phoenix like, oh, well, Phoenix likes it, then it must be good. And so we had some credibility early on, which really helped our company grow.
A lot of people have the players, but let's talk a little bit about the authoring program, the instructors package. How is that different? So from what most people see on the screen as a user, where you're just playing, then you upgrade to an instructor. Explain a little bit on how that's different, because I think a lot of people, they don't see that for the first time until you show them, or they get on your website and see it. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between playing and authoring.
Yeah. So like you said, we do have a player and then an authoring mode. And when we get a lot of Blue Card customers with that exact question, they're saying, well, what can I do with this instructor edition that you have? And basically everything that's made that you see that Blue Card makes, they make it on the instructor edition. So that's where all the authoring goes on, where you're taking your pictures, you put your backgrounds in, then you can put the smoke, fire, hazmat elements, victims, whatever you're going to do. You can put that all together in the instructor edition. And then anything that you make in the instructor edition can then be played back on the player that most of the Blue Card people will see. And so when it gets to the point where they've done their Blue Card sims, or they're going to have a test and they want to do different things, or they want some local buildings of their own, that's when we get the call, from a typical Blue Card customer that says, hey, we want to make our own simulations now. What do we need? And what they need is the instructor edition at that point.
Mm-hmm. And how do you do that? What's that cost generally? And what advice would you give to somebody who's going to start authoring their own stuff?
Well, the big thing is when you look at a Blue Card sim, and there's a lot of them. I think there's over 50, major sims that you guys include with your instructors. Those are really involved simulations. I mean, there's multiple views, there's multiple stations, there's all sorts of different things with a lot of slides. And so a lot of people think that we're going to get the instructor edition, and then we're going to make a sim, and in their head they're thinking of a Blue Card sim. Well, there's just no way someone can sit down for the first time and make a sim to that level. I mean, those are people that have been doing it for years and very familiar with the software and very familiar with what they want to do with that sim. So I always tell people, when you first start off very simple. Just do maybe some sets and rep stuff where you're just showing maybe one single view of the building, and maybe it's just the first 10 minutes of that fire. So someone's got to come on, they got to do their report on conditions, and they've got to figure out what kind of, what are they going to need to put this fire out initially. And so then you could run your different crews through it. Your company officers can go through those sets and reps, and just looking at a single view of a simulation, and then build from there. And then once they're comfortable building sims, and then they go, okay, let's do something maybe with two views. Maybe we have the front and the rear view and so then they can build on it from that. Another thing that I always tell people when they first start building sims is that, you have to know why you're building the sim to begin with. So some people will just take a picture of a building and start slapping a bunch of smoke and fire on it, but have some sort of idea, like, well, what are we trying to accomplish with this simulation? Do we have a weakness in what our guys are doing, and we want to target that in this simulation, so that when we run guys through it, we're reinforcing some concept that we want them to understand that maybe they're not doing. And then the other thing I'll tell customers is that when you build that sim, don't always be thinking of command level personnel, like, oh, this is like a promotional assessment center. This is something for a battalion chief, or, that we're going to do. Because when you get this down at the crew level, this is some of my favorite training that we even had back where I worked, is that you can just sit around as a crew, put a simulation up there, and you've got like a new tailboard fireman that he hasn't seen any fire, and you can put up something on the screen and say, hey, what's going to kill you if you go in there? How are we going to stay safe? What do you think we should do on this? And then the company officers can see what his crew, what's their level of knowledge, what do they expect, and he can say, well, here's what I would order, and here's why. And they can have just those discussions in a kind of a non-threatening. It's not a test. It's just, hey, we're all just talking about this building that's 2 blocks from our station that we might have a fire on that night. And it's super powerful to have that kind of training.
That's good stuff. And what I like to do is, even if it's 5 slides, 4 slides, is storyboard it out. So you know ahead of time, like, this is what I want. Are we going to go defensive on it, or what tactics are we going to want to talk about? And then you storyboard that out, and you build the sim. And I think that's wonderful advice, to not make it overcomplicated, because when we started building sims before Blue Card, we got Digital Combustion, and it was 90 hours of overtime we were budgeting per sim that we were doing, because we were trying to do full-blown Phoenix sims instead of what you're suggesting, which is, I think, fantastic. As far as FAQs go, because we all get them on how Digital Combustion works, what's the biggest questions you get? And then what are the tools that you have for your users to navigate all that? Well,
the biggest, obviously the biggest question we get is, well, can I use my own pictures in it? And so, of course you can. That's what it's built for. And you can take those pictures with a cell phone. The biggest thing is that you've got to get those pictures into the computer, and there's various ways of doing that, whether you're on a Mac or Windows. But, it brings up an interesting point, because of the FAQ that you're talking about. One of the biggest questions I'll get initially is, how easy is this to use? And I always answer, it's like, well, that's not an easy question, because a lot of times what happens is that someone will buy Fire Studio, like someone will see it at a show. Maybe it's the training officer, maybe it's the chief, maybe it's somebody else, but they say, hey, this is the greatest thing. We want simulations in our department. So they take it back, and they're going to say, okay, Joe's our training officer. Joe, we want you to make us simulations. This is the best thing. We're so happy. Just make us simulations. Well, Joe could be one of 2 people. Joe could be a super tech guy that loves working with computers, or he could be maybe a guy toward the end of his career that doesn't even like using Microsoft Word. And so if you give it to that Joe, he's not going to be successful, and he's going to say it's really hard and he can't use it. You give it to someone else who likes being in the computer world, who uses computers and they're comfortable with it, then it's going to be very easy. I mean, we built it for ourselves. I mean, we've been doing this for almost 24 years now, and we built it for ourselves. Doug and I both had 30 years in the fire service, and so I think that's why we've been successful, is because we kind of know from the fire department, from the firefighter standpoint, of how we want it to work. And of course it can't be overly technical, because we want as many people to be able to use it as they can. So that's probably our biggest question is how easy is it to use? And as far as what you have, as far as resources, we've got a full printed manual that you can print out on a PDF. We've got tutorial videos on our YouTube channel, all sorts of self-help things that you can. And then we give you free tech support. So if you're a customer of ours and you need help, you can call our 800 number, and we'll call you back and talk you through stuff. You can email us and say, just with this question, if we can answer it on email, we will. If it's a little more complicated than that, we call you back and we'll talk you through it. And I'll have people come up in our shows and they'll say, hey, I've been trying to do this for 3 months. I can't figure it out. And I'm like, well, you should just give us a call. And so I'll show them. It maybe takes us 5 minutes to figure it out. And so I always encourage people, if you're a customer of ours, just call us or email us if you have trouble. Don't struggle, because we're there to help you.
And the one of the other cool things is you guys are firefighters. Maybe you're nerds. I don't know. You're not. I mean, that from day one, that's been the great thing about working with you guys is you're firefighters. You understand it. You didn't start this as a technical company. You started this as a fire simulation program, and that's the spirit in which you're continuing on. So there's so many products out there, and I joke about the nerd thing, but there's so many products out there that a company just wanted to start because they're a tech company. and they didn't really understand the end user. And you guys get it because you're firefighters, and you know the questions, and you know the product that people want to get at the end of things. The other thing is there's a video for everything. I mean, you can go to between YouTube and your website. If you're having problems loading something or creating something, you guys have great tutorial videos to step everybody through this. And the other thing that I really love is it's a one-time fee, right? There's not annual subscription fees, or is there an annual subscription fee?
No, and that's what, and we tell people this all the time because, most software companies, including our competitors, they've all moved to a subscription model. But we know in the fire service, being there for 30 years, your training budget, if you have one, is the first thing that's going to get whacked in a budget crisis. And so the last thing we want you to do is to buy our simulator, and you've got all these sims, and you've got a program going, and you've got monthly training going, and then they say, hey, we can't fund this next year. So next thing you know, your software gets turned off and your program's dead. So with our program, you buy it, you own it, it's yours. And then what we do is we have a really long development cycle in between versions. So like we came out with Fire Studio 6, I think in 2016, and we're just releasing Fire Studio 7 in the next month or two. And, so that's a long time in between, but that doesn't mean we weren't developing the program. We've been updating it for free for all of our customers in that whole period of time, because we know that anytime, even if it's an upgrade, you've got to go to budget, and you've got to get it approved, and you've got to convince somebody that you need it. And so we try and make it so that all the incremental updates are free. And then when we do a major upgrade like Fire Studio 7 is, then it's a fair upgrade price. But we don't ever make you, we actually had a customer yesterday at our show, and they said, hey, I think we have this, but we lost it. We don't know. I don't even know what version it is. So we looked it up, and they weren't even in our regular records. We had to go back and back. Well, we finally found out that in 2002, they had Fire Studio 1. Well, guess what? They still get the upgrade price from that. They get to upgrade to Fire Studio 7, from back in 2002, almost 20 years ago. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
What's new in Fire Studio 7?
Well, the big thing is there's a couple things, both in the Windows world and the Mac world. They're all changing their graphic subsystem. So both in Windows 10 and, their future versions. So we get all the information coming out saying, hey, for developers, this is where we're going. Same thing with Mac. They built their own chip, and so they're moving away from Intel chips and their graphic subsystem. They have an M1 chip that's coming out. And so we had to change the entire program, their graphic subsystem. So we just reprogrammed the thing in a completely new language. And so we tried to future-proof it now for years to come, because we know what's coming out. So that we did everything under the hood is completely different. Then what we did is we've got the fire that we're coming out with on 7 is you won't even believe it, because it looks so real. And we've got different, all the different structure elements. So you've got beams and angles and windows, and all those can be put in, and they look so real that you won't even believe that it's a simulation. That's our biggest compliment. If someone comes up and says, where'd you get that video? That's my biggest compliment. If someone thinks that something they're looking at is real. So the realism's up a notch. We've got a lot of new different layers that come in. We've got new victims. We've got trees that you can put in front. So a big problem has been if you have a picture of a building with a tree in front of it, it's really almost impossible to mask that off to put something behind it. Well, now we've got trees that you can do. We've got all sorts of new graphics for, the ABCD side, alpha, delta, all the different things, vegetation, power lines. And we just tried to, again, every time we come out with new things, our whole thing is just trying to make it look more real. And so I just say that Fire Studio 7 is more real than it's ever been.
Cool. Was there anything else you want to let people know about while we're talking?
Well, the big thing is then, of course, the new version, we'll put out an actual announcement. It'll be on our website, and it'll be, we'll probably put out an email blast to all our current customers. So if you're interested in upgrading, of course, you'll find out about it in the next month or so. And then as far as if there's any questions, like for the customers of Blue Card that are just using the player edition and are interested in finding out more about the instructor edition, certainly, the show is a great thing, but you can always go to our website, and then if you shoot me an email, just send something to support@digitalcombustion.com. That comes to both Doug and I, and we get back to you personally, and we'll help you through it. We'll help you through any kind of budget process that you go through, and hopefully get people using it. that's our goal is just, of course, we want the more people that use it, we think that it helps, and we think it helps your customers, and we think it helps, save your personnel.
Awesome. Well, Rich, thanks for being with us today.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
And that wraps up this episode of Bee Shifter. Thanks so much for joining us today. We put these out every 2 weeks, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of them. We may do more in the future, but right now that's what our schedules can do. Also, please rate this podcast if you can too. That helps us attract a few more listeners. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to go to the show notes and look me up there and pass them my way. If you have any suggestions or guest ideas, we'd be happy to hear those too. Until next time, thanks a lot for listening to Bee Shifter, and please be safe.